MRC has been a reseller for PTC, a gold reseller for all of North America for over 10 years now. We're unique because we mostly work over the phone. We don't necessarily have traveling salesmen, so it gives us a greater opportunity to get quicker turnaround. For example, if you have any interest in any of the PTC products, we can usually get them turned around and get them in your toolbox within 3 business days or less. Joining that, I know that many of you out there do already have access to Mathcad. Perhaps have been a long-time user, perhaps have been on 15, or using Prime 4 today. So those of you who are active on support, seeing Prime 5 today, you'll be able to access that as soon as it's released. And if you're not, please get in touch with us, and we'll work with you the best we can to get you up on the support. So presenting today from PTC is Angie Severino, who's been with PTC and Mathcad for a long time. She knows the program in and out, and we're very lucky to have her on the line with us today. For Prime 5, we're going to go over some of the 2D plot enhancements, talk about the formatting, the new titles, plot axes, the ability to do the second y-axis now that's been added, and touch on grid lines. All right, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Angie.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. This is Angie Severino speaking from PTC. I'd like to thank MRC for having me here today. So we're going to be talking about Mathcad Prime 5.0 today. And what you're looking at now is Mathcad Prime 5.0, and we're going to talk about what Mathcad Prime 5.0 will provide in terms of 2D plotting enhancements. So I think it's important to mention that this release is entirely focused on 2D plotting enhancements. We've received a lot of customer feedback from engineers that have been using Mathcad 15, Mathcad 14, previous versions of Mathcad, as well as engineers that have been using Mathcad Prime. And almost all of the engineers that are using an older version of Mathcad or even Mathcad Prime have indicated that we need to make improvements to 2D plots, that there are limitations with 2D plots. And so this release is really the 2D plotting release. So we're going to go through what's different in terms of 2D plotting between Mathcad 15 and Mathcad Prime 5 and Mathcad Prime 4 and Mathcad Prime 5. So we're just going to take a look at how 2D plots work in Prime 5. This is a preview of what's coming, and so I think that's why we're calling it a sneak peek. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, what we're seeing here is Mathcad Prime 5.0. And as far as the user interface is concerned, it looks exactly the same as the user interface for Prime 4, I would say Prime 4, maybe not Prime 3. Now, there's one exception to that. In Prime 5, on the Math tab, which is where we are now, there's a new button. This is the only difference. There's a new button here, and that button is the third one from the left, and I'm pointing to it right now with my cursor, and that's called Chart Component. So that is new in Prime 5. And what we've done in Prime 5 is embed an application that allows us to create very robust, very complete, very well customized 2D plots. And we do that through this chart application or chart component. So I might say application, app, component. I might use those terms interchangeably. They all mean the same thing. So when we want to create a really good 2D plot, this is what we're going to use. Now, the existing way of creating 2D plots in Mathcad Prime hasn't gone away. The existing method to create 2D plots is still here. And that's very important because a lot of times we have two different use cases for creating 2D plots. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. And that's under the plotting tab. So this is how we create plots today in Prime, and that's still here. That's not going away. And so we can use one or we can use the other. We can use the new application, the new charting application, or we can use both in a single Mathcad document. So just as a quick refresher, what I'm going to do here is create a quick 2D plot using the existing method, and then we'll create the same plot using the new method using the chart component. So we're going to hop over to the plotting tab, and this is just going to be a basic plot. We're just going to plot the sine and the cosine. So I'm going to insert an XY plot. And now here on the independent axis, we're going to plot the variable x, and then on the y-axis, we're going to plot the sine of x, and there's our plot. And then if we want to add a cosine curve, again, this is how we do it today. We're going to go to the plotting tab, and we're going to add another trace, and then we're going to add the cosine. So that's how we do it today, and then we can resize this. So now, if you're using Mathcad Prime 4 or 3 or 2 or 1, and if you're using then you probably know that this plot does have certain limitations. For example, there's no way to put a title on the plot unless you create a text box above the plot. So there's no title, there's no legend, there are no grid lines, there is no second y-axis, and basically no customization on fonts, on tick mark values, axes, etc. Okay, so those are some of the limitations. I mean, we can look at the plot, we can look at the data, but as far as customizing it, we're pretty limited. And as engineers, we really want to be able to customize the look and feel of these plots so that we can put them into reports and create very good quality, high quality presentation worthy plots. Now, we're going to create the same plot using the chart application. So I'm going to scroll down and show you how this works. So here, if we go to the Math tab, the chart component is what we're going to be dealing with, okay? And so we're going to click on that, and this is basically an embedded object for creating 2D plots in Mathcad Prime. So that's how it works. It works as an embedded object. And so if we put this in, we're going to insert a chart component. It puts in the chart application object for us. And it's blank because we haven't plotted any data. But there's a section at the top for inputs, and that's where we define our inputs to the plot. So we're going to right-click. So this is my right-click menu. And we're just going to recreate the sine and the cosine curves, and then we'll look at what we can do with it. So we're going to right-click, and we're going to select Insert Axis, X-Axis Expression. And so this is going to be our first variable on the x-axis, and we'll just make that an independent variable x. And then over here, we're going to right-click, and we're going to select Insert Y-axis expression, and this is going to be the sine of x. So then we can hit Enter, and there's our plot. So now let's add the cosine curve. So I'm going to come right underneath the first x-axis expression, and I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to put another one in. And again, this is also going to be plotted against the independent variable x. And then we're going to add a y-axis expression, and this is going to be the cosine. So now we have our two curves. So what we're going to do next, and this is where all of the functionality lies, is we're going to double click on this object. So if you see my cursor, it can be anywhere within this object. Okay, it can be in the input section, it can be on the plot, it doesn't matter. We're going to double click, and it's going to open the chart application formatting and customization dialog box. So let's double click. Okay, and it opens up this charting app. And so now here, we can format things, we can customize things, we can do whatever we want to do with this plot. And a lot of the things that we can do here, we cannot do in Mathcad 15 plots. Mathcad 15 plots are pretty good, but there is so much more flexibility available through this application than we had in Mathcad 15. And so you'll see some of that as we go through it. Now, just to go over things from a high level, because we're gonna dive into this, a couple things that we need to understand first. On the left, this panel, this is where we apply our settings. On the right is where we preview what we're doing. When we close this window, so when we X out of here, whatever we've done, whatever we see in the preview window is going to come back into our Mathcad document, and that's how it's going to look. So we double click on the object to activate this, and then we close this object when we're done, and however we have configured our plot is what we're going to see. So now, if we go to the left and we look at what's available here, I'm just going to go over things from a general standpoint. Okay, so here, where my cursor is pointing, that's the overall chart tab. Okay, so on that overall chart tab, we can set all of our formatting preferences for the plot. We can set background colors. We can set fonts, borders, titles, the legend. Okay, so here's the legend tab. Here's the title for the plot. So those are some of the things we can do, and that's on the plot in general, or on the chart in general. And then if we go to the X and Y, these tabs are for the X-axis and the Y-axis. Okay, so if I click on X, this is where we can set the preferences for the X-axis. For example, what do we want our arrow to look like on the X-axis? Do we want the arrow to increase to the right? Do we want the arrow to go on the left? What do we want the style for the X-axis to be? The color, the thickness, the display of the tick marks. What do we want all of that to look like? Do we want grid lines? Do we want to put a title on our X-axis, which we can't do with Mathcad Prime today? And then the same thing for the Y-axis. Okay, so we'll go through all of that. And then 1 and 2 refer to curve 1 and curve 2, because we have a sine curve and we have a cosine curve. So 1 refers to the sine curve because we did that one first. 2 refers to the cosine curve. And so those are our curves. And when we click on those tabs, we can customize what the lines look like for the actual curves. How thick do we want them to be? Do we want symbols? What color should they be? And things like that. And then also here on the setup, this is where we type in the keys for our legend. So trace 1 or curve 1 might refer to nominal data. Curve 2 might refer to minimum or maximum, and so this is where we type in the keys for our legend. So that's a general overview. So we're going to go back to the chart app, or the charting tab, and we're going to do a couple things here. So first of all, this chart background, okay, and there's so much we can do in here. I'm going to say it again. There's so much we can do that we can't do in Mathcad 15, and of course we can't do in Mathcad Prime today. So first of all, we can select what color we want the background to be. So the background refers to this outer portion of the chart, okay, outside the axes, and right now it's set to white, so we can make that a different color. So, you know, if we made it, I guess, one of these colors, maybe blue is good. So it sets the outer background color, and then it also sets the inner color as a couple of shades lighter, which we can also change later. So let's just set that. And then this box is for the border. And so I like a black border, but you can make it whatever color you want. We're going to change, we'll make the style solid, and then we'll change the thickness. So maybe we want it to be a little bit more pronounced. And then the corners, this is kind of neat. So we can actually accent the corners. So if we set the accent to 10, you're going to watch the corners of the font, all 4 corners. We're just going to see a little bit of an anchor applied. Okay, and so these are presets, 0, 3, 5, 7, 10, but you can type a number into this box I can type a 20 in there, and then we're going to see some pretty good anchors on the corners. So when I say that we have a lot of flexibility, these are the things that we're talking about. When I say that we have so many things we can do, it's all fine-tuning to make the plot look really, really presentable. These are the details that we're talking about that, weren't even in Mathcad 15. Now the plot area is this area inside where the curves are. So remember I said when we applied the chart background, we have the darker blue, and then inside the plot area we have a couple shades lighter. This is where we can change that. Okay, so if we want it to be different color, we can just apply that here. So if we want that plot area to be, I guess we could just make it this light shade of green/yellow. Now there's an opacity setting here too, okay? And the plot border, okay? The plot border is this area around the plot itself, and so we can make that, I guess, a solid line, and it's gray. So there it is. Now, that is just this tab here, the chart, and we're on the styles. So now if we go to the legend, we can activate the legend. Do we want a legend? We're going to click on that box, and the legend goes down here in the bottom right. Now we're going to tell it where we really want to place the legend. Above, top, middle, bottom, or under the plot. So I'm going to keep it in the bottom right. Okay, we can do left, center. I'm going to keep it in the bottom right here, but maybe we'll move it outside the plot. Okay, so now it's outside the actual plot. And we can also customize a font for our legend. So again, this is not possible in Mathcad 15. In Mathcad 15, you can put a legend on your plot, but you have no control over the font that's used, over the style, the color, all of the things that we're doing right now. So Arial is probably okay. Black is probably a good color. We can make it a little bit bigger if we want to. And then this is important, columns. If we want that legend to have a row-centric or a column-centric display, this is where we change that. So if we want to flip the display, I'm going to set this to 1. And you can see now we only have one column. Okay, and so the legend is going to go read left to right in one column. And now this border box, that applies to the legend. Do we want a border around the legend? So we'll activate that. Okay, and probably a solid line. Maybe we can make that a dashed line. And again, if you want to anchor the corners, you can. And then the background color in the legend. Because we probably don't want blue, so we can make that white, and then if we want it to be pretty opaque, we can make it opaque. So there it is. Okay, so that's the legend. So now let's go to the title. Okay, so we're going to put a title on our plot, and so this would say sine and cosine curve, and then whatever we want the font to look like. And I'm going to move this outside the plot. So we're going to put it, we'll keep it in the middle, but we'll put it above the font. Okay. And so as we're going through this, just observe that everything we're doing is on the left panel. We can't come into the plot and start changing things in here. It's tempting to click in here and maybe, change cosine to something else and type into these boxes, but that's not how this application works. We're going to configure everything in the configuration panel. We're going to preview it on the right. Once we're done, we're going to close this, and we're going to see our plot in the document. So Arial is probably fine, and so let's just leave everything as it is. We can put a border around that. Okay, and again, if we want it to be a little bit thicker, we can make it thicker. We can change the color of the border. If you want the border to be some other color, you can change that here. And then the background. Okay, so again, we probably want white. That probably looks good. We can change the opacity, and there it is. So That's the charting app. We've gone through the styles, we've gone through the legend, we've gone through the title. Now we can go to our x-axis. And so this is where we decide what we want our x-axis to look like and the tick marks that go along with it. So this tick mark box, it can be on or off. Okay, so we can take the tick marks off. We can put them back on. And the arrow right now is on the right. Okay, so that's this arrow here. And if we want it to be on both sides, then we'll click that box. If we just want it to be on the left, we'll uncheck that. So that's where we customize the arrow. Again, not possible in Mathcad 15 or in Prime. And then we can change the color of the axis. If we want it to be dark gray, we can change that here. We can set the thickness of the x-axis and then the values. Okay, and this is kind of neat. So I'm just going to leave the font at Arial. I'm going to leave on black. But the neat thing here, maybe we'll make them a little bit bigger. And we're talking about these values, -10, -8, -6, as we're going along the x-axis. This is kind of cool. We can actually set the angle that they position themselves relevant to the x-axis. Right now it's 0, so we're just seeing them straight up and down. But we can set this to 45 degrees, and I like this. I'm going to set this to 45 degrees, and then you'll see those values, you'll see them shift to 45-degree angles relevant to the axis. So I think that looks nice. And then this offset is how far down below the axis you want them to appear. So right now it's set to 0, but if you want to move them a little bit further down, you can change this to 3, and you can type numbers into this box too. So we can go 3, and now there's a little bit more room there. Okay, so it might look cleaner. And then, of course, we have the grid lines. This is something that people in Mathcad 15 use a lot, and it's not possible in Mathcad Prime. And I think that this has been such a frustration for engineers. So we've added grid lines, and now we can put grid lines on our plots. So we can just check mark x-axis grid lines, because remember, we're on the x-axis. Okay, we're dealing with the x-axis. We haven't dealt with the y-axis yet. So we're going to apply them to the x-axis. Going to change the color. So they're green, and dotted is probably good. And so now there they are. And then we have major and minor tick marks and grid lines too. So the title, the x-axis title, our plot's getting pretty busy. So we would just say that this is our independent variable x. And this is, for those using Mathcad Prime, you'll know that you can't apply a title for your x-axis right now. You simply can't. You just can't do it. So we've added the title. And now again, we would, go through all of these things for the font and the color and the size and everything. And we can put a border around that. And we can probably change the background color to, that's probably fine. And then finally, on the Setup tab, we can control the range of the x-axis. So the default is -10 to 10, and I'm just going to leave that as it is. So then we would go to the y-axis, and we would do all of the same things for the y-axis. Okay, so I'll probably just hop over to the grid lines and activate the grid lines and make them green as well. Maybe we can find the same green. And then go to the title and put the title there. And here we would say response curve. And I think that maybe we can put a border around it and set the background. Okay. And then on the setup, again, the range. Now finally, if we go to the 1, now we're dealing with our X data. And you can see, so the plot just got a lot busier, and that's because I selected the 1. And what's happening is that the chart component is putting upper and lower boundaries around the X data set. the sine curve. So those dotted lines, if you look super closely, they're basically highlighting the boundary, the outer and inner boundary of the sine curve. If I click on, that means that I'm dealing with the sine curve. If I click on the 2, we're going to highlight or boundary the cosine curve. So I'm going to click on the 2, and those lines move to the cosine curve. Again, our plot has gotten quite busy, so it might be hard to decipher these lines, but that's what's going on. And the reason our plot is busy is because we are applying all of these things. So now here, we're on the 1. That means we're on the sine. So we're going to, in the legend, here it says 1. We're going to change that. So we're going to say, this is our sine wave. Okay, and so we're doing the legend, and then we're going to go to the 2, and we're going to go to the setup, and we're going to call that our cosine wave. Okay, well, so now what we'll do is close the app, and we'll see the plot in the document with everything that we just did. So we're going to close this. We don't have to save it. We don't have to save the plot. We just have to close this. Okay, and now there's our plot. Oh, and you know what we should have done? Let's go back in. We should make those curves thicker. So we're going to go back to the 1, and we will just make that quite a bit thicker, and then we'll go to the 2 for the cosine, and we'll make that one thicker. And now let's close this, and the changes that we just applied can be seen here. Okay? Now, for presentation purposes, you may not want to display the input section. So there's a minus here, a collapsible icon. So if we click on that, it's going to collapse that input section, and now this is what the plot looks like. And if we grab the corner here, we can resize this to whatever size we want it to be. Now, let's go back into the app. So we're going to double click, and here we are. Now what we're going to do next is we're just going to clean this up a little bit because there's a few more things that I want to show you. So let's take off the grid lines. Actually, you know what? Let's make a copy of this, and we'll modify the copy. So making a copy and pasting it is a good best practice. We'll go to the next page, because then you can preserve all of your preferences, all of your settings, and just change the data and have everything else intact. So if you want to create a second plot and you want it to have the same look, the same feel, the same size as the first plot, the same font, you're going to copy your first plot, paste it, and then just make your changes. So now let's activate this. The first thing we're going to do is take off the grid lines. And so we're going to go to the x-axis, and we're going to go to the subtab for grid lines, and we're just going to turn them off. And then we'll go to the y-axis, and we'll go to the subtab for grid lines, and we'll turn those off. Now, what I wanted to show is some fun stuff that we can do with the colors. So if we go back to the overall charting tab, okay, so now here we're on the chart tab as a whole, just general preferences for the overall plot. We filled in the background with a solid color and we made it blue. Now this is just kind of fun. We can set that to a gradient, and if we set it to a gradient, we're going to see a blending of two different colors. So I'm going to set that to gradient. And now you can see here we have a second color on our color map to choose from. The first one is still the blue that we set in the first place. The second one is defaulting to white. And so our darkest blue will start in the top left, and then our lightest white will start or I guess finish in the bottom right. And then it just applies this gradient blending of these two colors to just create, you know, maybe a nice visual effect So if you want to change your two colors, if you don't want white, then you can change it to a different color. So if you want a different color, you could just change it here, maybe experiment. So there's the blue and the red, blue and pink. So that's the color gradient. And so then we can also do the same thing. That's for the chart background. We can also do the same thing for the actual plot area where the data is. So we set the background to yellow as a solid, but we can change that to gradient. And so now you can see here, we're going from yellow down to white, which is probably pretty good color combo, but we can change that second color too. So if we want yellow and, whatever color, maybe blue, that looks pretty bad. White is probably just fine to leave it there. And then we can also set the opacity, and we can also set, I guess this is probably where we would set the level of blending and transparency and how we want that to be rendered on the plot. So we can expect right now 0 means go from the highest intensity to the top in the top left to the highest intensity in the bottom right. But we can experiment with this too and just kind of flip the colors and things like that. So that is probably pretty good for now. So let's close this, and there's our plot. Okay, so we have the initial plot here that we made, and now we have the second one. So the next thing that we're going to do, and we'll just do this pretty quickly, is plot data. What we've done so far is we have an independent variable x, and then we have a plot that plots the sine response and the cosine response. But what if we have data? What if we've done a bunch of calculations and we have actual data vectors that we want to plot? So let's do that. And so I'll just make a note here. Okay, so we're going to plot two data vectors. And what we'll do is we'll define a data vector for force, and we'll plot, and we'll define a vector for distance, and we'll calculate torque, and then we'll plot the torque. So, okay, there we go. And so what we'll do is we'll go over to the input-output, not the input-output tab, the Matrices Table, and we'll just put in a quick table. And the left column will be force, and we'll use units of pound force. And then the right column will be distance, and we'll use units of inches. And so then we'll just type in some numbers here, and then we'll calculate the torque, maybe 2.5. And so let's see. Bear with me here while I put in these numbers. 3.8. Okay. So, as you know, force is the name of a variable that stores that left column with those units, pound force. Distance is the name of a variable that stores the right column in vector format in units of inches. So now let's just calculate the torque, and we'll just call it torque subscript 1, and this is going to be force times distance. So we'll just multiply those two columns by each other, force times distance, and since we're multiplying two columns of data by two vectors by one another, we need to vectorize that. And so now let's type torque equals, torque 1 equals, torque subscript 1 equals. Okay, and let's change those units to pound force times inches. So there's our torque vector. So let's plot this. And I think that we should probably just talk for a second about why we kept the old way of plotting and added the new way of plotting. Okay, why we kept the original plots intact and didn't take them out completely while we added the chart component. And the reason for that is because as engineers, when we're working, a lot of times we may not want to create a really fancy, fully customized, perfect looking plot. We might just want to take a quick look at what our data is doing. Are we on track? Does our data look right? Does this look okay? And we might want to just create a very quick plot and take a quick look. And then when we want to create something that is a higher quality plot, then we're going to use the charting application. So here we have, and we can go through that. So now here, if we just want to see what our torque looks like, we just want to get a pretty good idea of what's going on here with our data, we can very, very quickly plot it. Based on the x-axis, I would just plot force versus torque, and then over here, I would plot torque 1, and so then I can see what's going on. Does this look okay? Does it not? Am I free to go on? Should I stop? And do I need to go back and take a look at something? This is what my plot looks like. Okay, and so then I can just kind of tuck that away and maybe make a note saying this looks okay at this point. Okay, and then I can keep going. And if it does look okay, I'm going to keep going, and then I'm going to create my really good plot using the chart app. So let's do that. Okay, so now here, we're going to put in the app. So we're going to go to the Math tab. We're going to put in the chart component. So we're going to see the same thing we saw before. But this time, when we insert our x-axis expression, it's actually going to be our force vector. And when we insert our y-axis expression, that's going to be our torque subscript 1 data. You have to spell it right. Okay, there we go. So now we're going to see our curve. And so let's see, something didn't, oh, this is why. I clicked on the wrong button. So this needs to be, let me do this again. So this needs to be the y-axis. Okay, there we go. Okay? And that's how we get data into our plot versus independent variables. Pretty easy. Now, let's add another curve to this. Maybe we have a second set of torque values. And one thing that you'll notice here, look at the range of x data, 110 to 165. Those are our forces. Let's go back and look at our force vector. Okay, our force vector is 25 to 36. Not 100 to 165. So the chart app is actually plotting these force values in units of newtons because we're in the SI system, and in the SI system, the default for force is newtons. So when we send the force vector into the plot, it's plotting units of newtons. So if we look at force equals, this is the data that's being plotted. Okay, so we're just going to rescale that data. Now watch what happens to the x-axis, 110 to 165. We're going to rescale that data to units of pound force. And now we're looking at 25 to 36. So very easy to send units into your plot. Now here for the torque, we're going to rescale that to the units that we want as well. Okay, so let's add another data set. So we're going to add another x-axis expression here. This is going to be force. Okay, we're going to use the same force values. And now for the y, we're going to take our y data. We're going to scale it to the desired units, and we're going to multiply because I don't want to take the time to create another calculation with a secondary set of torques. So I'm just going to take the initial one and scale it by a factor of 2. So that's what I'm doing, just to get another curve onto the plot. Okay, so there's the second curve. So now what we'll do is we'll activate the component. We'll get in here. We'll probably just run through a couple things pretty quickly, and I won't put a title or anything like that, but I'm going to go to the traces, and I'm going to make these lines thicker just so that we can see them better. Okay, so then we'll go over to the curves and we'll set up our legend. Actually, let's go back to the chart app and let's activate the legend. So we're going to go to the legend and we're going to turn it on. And we'll probably want to do a border. And then we can go over to our curve. and label them in the legend. So then maybe this is the nominal torque, and then the second one could possibly be the max torque. Then we can close this, and we can minimize the inputs, and there's our plot. Now this one, the legend, I didn't transpose it. So when we did the legend the first time, I transposed it. So we had the legend going top to bottom. Now we have the legend going left to right, and it's inside the plot. The last time it was outside the plot, and it went top to bottom. Let me scroll up. Here, it's outside the plot, and it goes top to bottom. Here, we've left it inside the plot, and it goes left to right. So the point is that there are so many more options. There is so much more flexibility when it comes to 2D plotting and Mathcad Prime. A lot of these things are limitations that engineers using Mathcad Prime have run into. There's been a lot of frustration around 2D plotting in Mathcad Prime, and so it's nice to be able to say that we've closed all of those gaps when it comes to plotting in Mathcad Prime, and now we can create really good looking plots. We can do more than we did in Mathcad 15. We have more control around the fonts and the sizes, and the very fine details that go with creating plots that we couldn't even do in Mathcad 15. So there's that plot. And I guess maybe the last thing we can do here, we'll just do one more thing, is we'll add a marker to this plot. So maybe we have a certain threshold for torque. Maybe we want to mark that on the plot. So we'll go above the plot, and we're just going to define a marker. So I'm going to set up a range, an independent variable I. Actually, you know what? Let's do it in here. Okay. So now here, let's just say we have a threshold for torque at, we'll call it T thresh, and let's just say it's 180. So now here, inside the plot in the inputs, we're going to do another x-axis expression. And I guess I could be copying and pasting these things. I don't have to retype them every time. And then on the y-axis here, we're going to create a 4x1 vector that's set to our thresh. Okay, so we can come here and we can just create a 4x1 vector because our force has 4 inputs. So for every value of x, we need a value of y. And I'm doing it manually. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's use our variable, T thresh. I'm doing it manually, but we can automate this too, but I don't want to lose anyone. And then did I only create 3? Let's add another. There we go. Okay. So now we've added a marker at 185. Okay, so we can see what's going on at a torque value of 185. We can see what's going on there. And we could add another marker to label the point of intersection for force. Now, if we minimize these inputs, let's collapse them down, and we just look at the plot, we can change the marker here, the value of the threshold, so we can change the value of the threshold to 120, and we don't have to activate the plot for that line to move. So we just have to click on Enter, and then the marker will move, okay? So I think that we should probably wrap up. I want to summarize and just capture the main ideas here. So the main feature in Mathcad Prime 5.0 is 2D plotting enhancements, okay? And so it's 2D plotting enhancements, but there are a lot of enhancements. That close the gaps to 2D plotting in Mathcad 15 and 14 and prior releases, and a lot of enhancements that let us create better quality, higher quality, better looking plots in Mathcad Prime. So there's really 2 aspects to this. There are the formatting and the customization, but then there are also the technical aspects, like the grid lines and the secondary y-axis and things like that. So, and the legend and all of those sorts of things that go with the technical aspect of it. So, the charting application is very robust. It's nice that we can do both. We can have the original plots just to do more quick plots and just spot check our data, see if we're on track. But then if we do need to create a pretty good looking plot, then we can. And these plots we can copy and paste. So if we wanted to paste this into PowerPoint for a design review, into Word for a report, if we're using Word for our reports, we can just copy it and paste it. Whereas in Mathcad Prime today, the title is separate. There's no axis labels. There's no x-axis label, y-axis label. There's no legend. So you can copy and paste a plot, but there's no context around the plot. So now in Prime 5, you'll be able to get everything that goes with that plot. The legend, the axis labels, the title, it's all part of the plotting object. So I would like to thank MRC for having me today. Thank you very much for hosting the webinar and for having me present. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I will transfer it back over to Matt, and we can handle any Q&A that may have come up. Thank you very much for joining, everyone. Matt, back to you.
New chart component that was added. So thank you very much. Yeah, it looks like we can do a lot more realistic functionalities that Mathcad Prime has been lacking and certainly weren't available in Mathcad 15. So it's great to see an investment being made in Mathcad. All right, so I had two my own questions came up before we roll into the whole Q&A. And meanwhile, as I pose these, anyone out there who does have questions, please post them in the Q&A section, and we're going to get through as many as we can today. So Angie, you mentioned a nice workaround is of keeping formatting. If you design your first component and you want to maintain that, simply copy, paste, and then adjust your variables as needed. Is there a way to set up a default format for your charts?
Yes, there are templates. There are templates that can be set up. And so once you decide what those default formats are, you want your first curve to be blue, and you want your second one to be red, and you want certain fonts, then you can create a default template and use that to apply all of your preferences and settings. That will actually save a lot of time.
Oh, that could be great for a company with multiple users to all have the same layout.
Yep.
All right, and I did have one other question. You mentioned, great interoperability, being able to copy and paste your whole chart component into, say, Microsoft Word or PowerPoint. Is it going to bring the components over as well if you have those hidden, or will it just bring the chart?
No, it won't bring the component. It'll just bring a picture of the chart as you copy it.
All right, fantastic. All right, so we've got some questions here lined up in the queue. We'll go through some of those. And again, if any more come in, please feel free to post them. Okay, so one of the first questions we saw in here was in regards to Works. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the partnership with Works has ended, and I don't believe there's any plan to bring that back to Mathcad. We went to, and Angie, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but after that we went to our own internal Mathcad worksheets that are available through PTC that has come preloaded with a ton of components based on what type of engineering or variables you're looking for.
Yeah, so we have worksheet collections for Mathcad. We have a mechanical engineering worksheet collection and an electrical worksheet collection. We have quite a few different worksheet collections. Works, we actually our partnership with McGraw-Hill did end, but we were able to renegotiate that contract, and McGraw-Hill did give us permission to implement Works formulas in Mathcad Prime. So So just a little bit of historical information. The Works library from Mathcad was never owned by PTC to begin with. It was owned, all of that content is owned by the publisher, McGraw-Hill. And so when that contract expired, we were no longer able to provide Works formulas in Mathcad format. But we were able to come to an agreement with the publisher, and now we have Works formulas, 6th edition. We were only able to get permission from them to publish Mathcad Prime worksheets for Works 6th edition. So we do have that, and it is available for purchase. And so that is basically the entire Works Handbook 6th edition implemented in Mathcad Prime.
Great, fantastic. Yeah, good to hear, and we'll definitely keep an eye out for that. If you have any interest in those worksheets, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to go over your options and how to get access to them. The next question I see posed here is in regards to global variables. Yes, Prime did bring global variables back, and I believe, I think it was 3.1 where they were first reinitiated.
Yep,
am I right on that, Angie? Okay.
Yeah, yep, that is correct. So we do have global variables in Mathcad Prime now. And they behave a little bit differently than they did in Mathcad 15. In Mathcad 15, you could define a global variable, but it could be overwritten. So even though it was global, it could still be overwritten by a local variable. In Mathcad Prime, the behavior is different. So global variables in Mathcad Prime behave more like constants. If you define a global, you won't be able to override it. So it behaves much more like a constant. It's visible within the entire document, but you won't be able to override it with a local variable definition.
Great, I appreciate that. Yeah, I remember before, I think it was like if you changed pages, you could in prior versions, you could reassociate a new variable for that after a page change. So that's great, it's been fixed. All right, here's a good one that we get a lot as a reseller, and I know there's been a great debate as to whether or not Mathcad should enter the word processing game or stick as an engineering tool, but Spellcheck. Do you know if there's any plan? I know 5.0 doesn't necessarily include it. Do you know if there's any plan to add that in an upcoming release?
Yeah, we do have plans to add a Spellcheck to Mathcad Prime. The challenge that we've had is that every time we release a version of Mathcad, we release it globally in 9 different languages. And so the challenge is implementing Spellcheck in 9 different languages. We're not allowed to release a version of Mathcad in English only. So we have to implement Spellcheck in 9 different languages. And so the work is done for the English version. It's done, but that's the speed bump that we're facing in being able to ship it with Spellcheck. And so there is a plan to add a Spellcheck to Mathcad Prime, and there's a little bit more work, or I guess maybe a lot more work that needs to be done as far as translating goes into those 9 languages and making sure that, that because we're a global company, making sure that we adhere to those standards. And so it's coming, and I don't know when, but it is coming. So we're getting there slowly but surely.
Well, it's reassuring to hear that some of the work has already been there. So, if Mathcad wasn't serious about doing it, they wouldn't have started it at all. So I'm glad to hear it's coming.
Yep, it is. It is because, and we understand what the issues are there. If you have a 50-page report in Mathcad, you have to be able to run a spell check to make sure that there's no spelling mistakes. And so there's a need for it, and we understand that, and we're working on it.
Great, thank you. On another question, so getting back to the chart components, if a chart component is created, is there a way to export beyond maybe moving to a third-party program? Can we export it directly or save the image directly as a JPEG or an image format?
Oh, that is a good question, and to be perfectly honest, I actually haven't tried that, but I can do it very quickly. Okay, so the answer is no, you have to actually copy it and paste it. You have to copy it and you have to paste it.
And from there, you can paste it into an image program or again, a Microsoft Office program and save it from there.
Yep. As soon as you copy it, it's on your clipboard. And so at that point, it'll just behave like anything else on any other image on your clipboard. And you can paste it into an imaging tool, a picture tool, a document, anything basically.
Okay, great. So the next one up is in regards to the location of the x-axis. The question was wondering if we can actually change the location of the x-axis or I guess have the y-axis extend past it. For example, or at least from my understanding of the question, if we wanted to have, say, 5 ticks underneath where the x-axis begins on the y, is that possible?
Yep. Yeah, you can do that. So through the configuration, you can basically have the 0 line for the y-axis intersect the x-axis at a different location, so that the x-axis appears like it's moved up or moved down, and you can have y values below the x-axis. So you can do that.
Fantastic. All right, let me see here. What else? All right, so a question came in. I think I can handle this one. In regards to placing the legends, it was asked if you can click and drag them. It doesn't appear to be so. When the chart component was open, when you went to legends, there were several options there where you want to be located: top, bottom, middle, left, right, or outside left and right. So it is customizable, but it's not necessarily a click and drag.
Right. Yeah. Those are all preset locations that you select from the configuration panel. So it's going like I think I talked about this. It's very tempting to want to go into the preview window and manipulate things in the preview window, but it really is just a preview, just a preview. And so the location of the legend does need to be set in the configuration panel on the left. You won't be able to drag it around. You won't be able to drag the title around any of the text that's in the plot. You can't move with your mouse. You do it through the config panel.
Okay. Notes on the chart. Is it possible to have a text field put over the chart in order to put notes in or highlight something specific?
Yeah, so text boxes and things like that can be overlaid on top of the chart, and so that's fine. We can create text boxes and just overlay them on top of the chart.
All right, let's see. We've got a couple more here, Angie. I appreciate it. All right, this one is there an output trace function that might display the x, y values at a current position, current cursor position?
Oh, that's such a good question. Oh, you know what? I wish that there was. Now, you can do that in the native plots in Mathcad Prime. You can do that in the native plots, and you can put the markers on the plot, and it'll give you the x and y values depending on your location along the curve. Now, in Prime 5, we don't have the ability to do that. So I guess that's probably
in the chart component, not necessarily all of Prime 5, just in the new chart component feature, correct?
That's right. Yeah, you can do. Yeah, that's right. That's probably a good clarification. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, in the native plots in Mathcad Prime, you can put markers on the plot, and then the marker callouts will show you the x and y values. It doesn't behave like a trace in Mathcad 15, but you can get those values using the markers. In Mathcad Prime 5, we don't have that in the chart component. We have the markers that'll give you the X and Y values in the native plots, but not in the component.
Okay. All right, so it is possible, just not, you won't be able to make it look as nice as the new components allow you to do. All right, what else do we got here? The second y-axis would be useful for plots with two variables with different ranges. Is there any plan to add a second axis?
Oh, yes, there is a second axis in Prime 5, and I actually didn't show it. There is a secondary y-axis in the chart component. And so against one independent variable x, you can have a y1 axis over one range of y values and a y2 axis over a different range of y values. So it's in Prime 5 through the chart component.
Is that under the, I believe there was the general overview for the chart under the component screen, and then there was also a tab called axes. Would it have been under that? Okay.
Yes. Yep. It's under. Yeah. So it's under the axes tab. Yep. And then there's a button to add a second y-axis. So you click on that button, and you'll get your second y-axis.
Fantastic. I know that's been a big feature a lot of people have sought for, so it's great news.
Yes. Thank you for asking the question.
All right. We've got two more here in the queue, or I think a couple more here. Can you add a suffix or prefix to an axis label? For example, adding the symbol pi or degrees. So I think what they're referring to is when you clicked on the component label and say for the legend or the axes, can you use symbols in that little text field?
Yeah, you can use them, but there's a but. You'll have to copy them and paste them in to that to the field, to the text field in the configuration panel. So, for example, in Mathcad, you can type P followed by Control G, and that's how you get pi. You won't be able to do that in the chart component. So you can put pi in there, and you can put degrees in there, but you have to copy the symbol and paste it.
Okay. Or perhaps, do you know if they had a symbol keyboard, if they'd be able to do it from there?
I'm not sure if that, I would have to check on that. I'm not sure if the app, if the text fields in the app recognize that.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay. Let's see. Another question here was in regards to the 3D graphing component. And correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think there was too much more added to that. I think the focus of the Prime 5 edition was just in 2D.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The focus of Prime 5 was exclusive to 2D plots. And what we would like to do is use this chart application and extend it to 3D plots because there's a lot that needs to be done with 3D plots as well. And so that will be the next step with the chart component. We'll be extending it to 3D plots. But in Prime 5, the focus is 2D plots.
Okay, fantastic. And then the last one I see here in the queue, what is the future of list boxes?
Yeah, list boxes. So we're very hopeful that we'll get list boxes into Prime 6. They're not in Prime 5. Again, the focus of Prime 5 is 2D plotting enhancements in the chart component. But list boxes and radio button groups, basically what we called the web controls, those are pretty close to the top of the list for Prime 6. So so they will be in Mathcad Prime. I can't promise when, but they're very near the top of the priority list, and I'm hoping they'll be in Prime 6.
Fantastic. Something else to look forward to. All right, that looks like everything in the queue. So Angie, I'd like to thank you for your time, and everyone out there, I'd like to thank you for spending a little over an hour with us today, and hope you get some great information. Again, I just want to hit a couple points. If you have any questions about Prime 5, getting access or getting updated to it, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to help. You can see Stephanie Hung's information there on your screen, and then from there she can get you to a proper sales rep.